Welcome to The World Today. I'm waqas Majeed Khan. Today we're talking about the Pak-Afghan relationship. Earlier we were talking about the US-Pakistan relationship and its trajectory, but it's equally important to discuss Afghanistan's relationship with Pakistan that has been deteriorating in the past year or so. Very unfortunate. We will talk about how to address this decline in our relationship. We're also going to talk about the statements that President Ashraf Ghani made regarding the US role in Afghanistan. We'll also talk about, according to some media reports, we have information about the delegation from the Qatar office of the Afghan Taliban who visited Islamabad for furthering the peace process in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, nothing came of it. And we'll also talk about Nikki Haley, also known as Nimrata Randhawa, what she said regarding her meetings in Afghanistan. She was also in Afghanistan along with a delegation, and we'll talk about what she had to say. So let's get the conversation started. I'd like to introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me today, first of all, we have Brigadier Aftab Afzal with us. He's a defense analyst. Along with him, we have Mahrrukh Khan. She is the research fellow at the Center or Institute of Strategic Studies. And along with him, we have Mohammad Sheraz, regular on our show. Thank you very much for being here. Brigadier Sir, I'll start with you. Very interesting interview that President Ashraf Ghani gave in the US. First thing that he said was that the Afghan National Army would not last 6 months if the US support in Afghanistan were to collapse. How do you view this particular assessment of the Afghan president about his own army, sir?
You see, ever since President Ashraf Ghani took over in Afghanistan, and his winning election, partially controversial also. So Americans were supporting him, and probably he was the acceptable person to them, and he was brought there, and they made sure that he proceed with his presidency.
Oh, he was installed.
Yes, good office. Ashraf Ghani tried his best to pull along and meet the requirement. But now once he has seen, like President Karzai also, he was also sometime very realistic, right? So sometime these people, they're inward, they look inward and they see that what are the facts around. So then they are there to speak truth. In this interview also, once he was asked the question that can his government stay if the Americans pull out? So he very clearly said that Afghan army will collapse within 6 months, and his government in 3 days.
Well, that's the perception that people are talking about on the streets, that the government in Kabul would not last 3 days if the Americans were to withdraw.
But he also ratified the same
Absolutely,
during his interview. And at the same time, if you see, the force commander of Afghanistan, General Nicholson, he was also sitting there. And he said that I can win this long-run war over 16 years with the new US policy in Afghanistan, whereby putting more pressure and intense pressure on Pakistan.
Right.
So that is already the narrative which is there. We are seeing for last since when the Trump came into power. So it is there. Basically, I can say that now there is some problem, that probably the Ashraf Ghani, his government is not getting proper funds, there is some problem. Only then the president of Afghanistan, they come up with such controversies while sitting on the shows and TV and statements and reports. Otherwise, they are very cooperative, right? But at the same time also, I must mention here that Ashraf Ghani has no choice, no option than to move with the Americans. And now he has very interestingly indicated also that probably the Kabul is around in siege, look like siege, and then is again most of the Pashtun area of Afghanistan is under the control of Taliban.
Right, sir.
It is the president of Afghanistan who accepting these things. And very interestingly, a journal sitting in the same program, he is talking of winning a 16-year prolonged war.
Absolutely, sir. That's the question I want to bring to Mahrrukh. As Brigadier Saab has also mentioned, General John Nicholson saying that the new strategy in the US, which has put more pressure on Pakistan, is going to help him win the war. How realistic do you think this approach is? I mean, they've been putting pressure on Pakistan for a long time, and how effective has that pressure been in terms of dealing with the issues in Afghanistan?
I personally think that the US really needs to get out of the denial mode that they're in, that certain pressure or increasing their troops in Afghanistan will actually lead to a win situation for them. You know, they need to really concentrate on talking with these factions, you know, completely talking with these factions, coming on terms with the parties they are fighting with and with the parties they are fighting for. You know, they need to talk to that. War will not get them anywhere. We have seen the history of Afghanistan. Many countries have come, they've lost a lot of lives, but nothing has been achieved. So this perception of the US, it's not new. All we see are new faces with the same narratives. You know, they started this war 16 years back, more than 120,000 troops, 100,000 troops, and it didn't go anywhere. So just by increasing a few more troops will not lead them anywhere, and this denial will actually not get them anywhere.
All right, Sheraz, when people were asked, or the journalist asking the questions in that particular interview, said that the perception of the people of Afghanistan is that the Ashraf Ghani government would not last 3 days if the Americans were to pull out their support. But more than that, the Americans have already spent about $1 trillion in Afghanistan. They've lost 2,400 soldiers in Afghanistan. Despite these realities that are facing them are staring them in the face, they refuse to acknowledge the ground realities. Why do you think this denial exists within the American administration's perception?
Thank you, Waqas. Earlier on in another program, I was discussing the same topic, and something like popped up in a way that understanding on the one side, if you think Pakistan is successfully winning and you are taking the same message back home, then you have no other option to, you know, soul searching within yourselves. The criticism will be directed towards the US government by their own people. So that is one way of looking at it. That's important, that if they go with the message of failure in Afghanistan, back home they have to be answerable to the people over there. So that is first the domestic factor itself. Secondly, at the moment we see then again the world is moving towards a more multipolar world. So in that regard, they don't want to lose any initiative or incentive when it comes to dealing with other powers in the region. As far as US is concerned, I don't think so US is willing to leave Afghanistan. If we look at from the other side, I don't know why Ashraf Ghani, Afghan president, comes up with these weak statements. On the one hand, you are trying to pressurize Afghan Taliban to come on the table, and while at the same time you say that we are totally losers for that matter. You know, that is not going to help the peace process in Afghanistan. So US must advise the Ashraf Ghani regime that they should not utter such words in public. They can discuss these kind of fears among themselves, you know, because the public already is of the opinion that the Afghan Ghani government or the US-led government will not be able to last more than 3 days. So on the one end, you want to have a logical end to the war, while at the same end you are trying to express the utmost weakness on your part. So I don't think so this will help the negotiating process itself.
And what does it say about the differing and completely opposite views being aired by Ashraf Ghani and John Nicholson? John Nicholson is saying the opposite of what Ashraf Ghani is saying, sitting on the same, sharing the same screen space.
I think that's interesting in a way, that one is saying like, we can win it, other one is saying no, it's not possible. So I think first of all they need to find a common ground among themselves and then with Pakistan. So I think that's more important. So the weakness of the strategy, the weakness of the approach itself is very clear between themselves. Who are the major stakeholders in Afghanistan? The Afghan government, and secondly, on behalf of which the Afghan government is being run, United States of America.
Well, one of the other things that President Ghani said, sir, was acknowledging the threatening presence of 21 international terrorist organizations that are now operating in the country, and also saying that suicide bombers were terrorizing the people of Afghanistan, and the Taliban have sown deep doubts about the government. What do all these statements really indicate to you, sir?
Actually, on a number of times I have already told on the programs that the Americans after 2014, they have not carried out any major operation in Afghanistan. They are just carrying out very
Training exercises.
And intelligence targeted operations. But those operations cannot create effect, or they cannot capture area or establish their hit. So it is not only President Ashraf Ghani saying, but it is everybody in Pakistan, Afghanistan and around. Everybody knows what is the factual position there on the soil of Afghanistan. So I was just now today thinking that very soon General Nicholson will also speak the same language what the Ashraf Ghani is speaking today.
I want to interrupt you here,
There is a reason behind.
I want to interrupt you here because General Nicholson was asked point blank what he thought about the war effort in Afghanistan, and he said that, yeah, with the new policy, I do believe that this is the end game. This is a policy that can deliver us a win. I would like you to analyze that statement, sir.
You know, the new policy, the new narrative is just a recipe of chaos and confusion, nothing else. And through this policy, there is no hope of peace coming in Afghanistan or any success coming in hand of Americans, right? So once it has been sufficiently rejected by at every forum and analyzed and rejected, but still they want to pursue. Perhaps they think that if we pressurize Pakistan, we cut off the aid of Pakistan, Pakistan will come forward to cooperate with us, and we will use Pakistan in a way that it will help us winning the war. Issue of winning is out of question, I tell you.
No, it seems
nobody can win the war in
it
Afghanistan.
seems that the Americans
Yes.
want the Pakistan army to fight their war
General,
for them in Afghanistan.
Please try to understand the personality of the commander also in the military warfare. General McChrystal also in 2010 and 11, he was very exuberant, and he was a general of substance there in Afghanistan, and he had the hope that he will do some better. But ultimately he left the place and he had to resign. Not only left Afghanistan, but he met Obama and he resigned there. And he told that we can never win a war here in Afghanistan, and he called their planners and military leadership as stupid at that time, even during the conference, and then every fact was there on ground. So if we see just the background and the history also, this statement of Ashraf Ghani is based on facts, and the Americans rather just taking some other view of this, they should be realistic enough, right, to visit and review their policy, what they have given, because that using that policy they cannot bring any result here, or they can go for success. Especially it is a very, very simple thing, understandable in this region, that relationship between Afghanistan, Pakistan and India, right, in this troika, Pakistan cannot accept any prominent role of India in Afghanistan or even in the region. So it is very clear. How can they expect any cooperation from Pakistan if they try to
prop up the Indians in Afghanistan?
There in
Absolutely,
Afghanistan, and try to open another front for us. And second also, Pakistan against this policy has responded, I think, very nicely in a very calculated and very, very balanced way, and the way they have approached and the way they have taken this issue, I think it is the right issue. And second is, it is not only the Nicholson statement or the statement of Ashraf Ghani. We have to see our own security concerns, and we rightly know that sitting in Pakistan, what can we do and what are the limits of our cooperation with the Americans as long as the war on terror is concerned. And with present view and with the present situation in Afghanistan and in Pakistan, after this golden tweet that it came from USA,
Yes.
I think Pakistan cooperation is no a far dream for them.
Well, sir, we also have the Indians piling on pressure from the line of control. We'll come to that later, sir. But right now, I want to talk to Mahrrukh about the delegation from the Afghan Taliban who were visiting Islamabad, according to media reports, to kickstart the long-stalled intra-Afghan peace talks. But unfortunately, they failed to break the ice. One of the most important things, and they've been talking about this earlier as well, is they want to negotiate with the Americans and not with the Afghan government. So where is the wisdom in this particular approach by the Afghan Taliban? Do you think that is the right approach, or the Afghan government has some legitimate value itself in Afghanistan that the Taliban should be talking to them?
I think this particular statement that you just said pretty much reflects why the frustration is in Ashraf Ghani, that their own government wouldn't survive 3 days without the US. So you can pretty much judge why the Afghan Taliban want to talk to the US then. You know, the kind of I'd say mistrust that exists between two major parties that will exist post-US withdrawal in Afghanistan, they are not on terms with each other. And secondly, we also need to understand the kind of space the Afghan government will give the Taliban factions. You know, what kind of constitutional reforms they require, what are their conditions, their terms. Because initially, as far as I can remember, the first precondition to the negotiations were the withdrawal of the US from Afghanistan. Now that has changed. Now the Taliban factions, they want to talk to the US instead of talking to the Afghan government itself. So this reflects the weakness of the Afghan government, the coalition government that they have, and how much vulnerable they are in Afghanistan. You know, they're living in fortresses themselves. You know, the same interview that you were referring to, the same journalist was like her words that 3 years back, roads were much more, you know, broadened, but now it's like under siege. You know, it's fortress, literally fortress. So this particular statement just reflects the current, you know, scenario that's in Afghanistan.
Absolutely, there's no doubt about that. Shiraz, one of the things that also came out from the meeting was that a breakaway faction of the Afghan Taliban held a meeting in Istanbul with the Hizb-e-Islami leaders. Now that is very, you know, pertinent, because the Hizb-e-Islami was also anathema to the Kabul government earlier on, and then they were able to negotiate with them and bring them on board. So any hope there? Because we also have reports of you know, this breakaway faction not really representing the overall Afghan Taliban movement. So
Because
what's your
on the
opinion?
one end, you have all these factions, you know, brewing up. On the other end, you have ISIS. So I don't see any end to this process. You know, I think this process will continue because United States of America started its war on a wrong footing. You know, even nowadays, in the previous recent past, they are labeled as the American Talibans rather than, you know, the ones who are here to free us from Taliban. So that's the difference. Now they are being labeled for what they came to remove from Afghanistan, the trouble of Taliban regime. Now they have become the new Taliban, the American Talibans within Afghanistan.
And I'd like to add over here, the Taliban point of view is that the entire peace process has been hijacked or is being damaged by intelligence agencies, and they're defaming the real peace process in Afghanistan. That is something coming from the Afghan Taliban, which is quite new and different.
Afghan Taliban over the period of time has been able to develop themselves politically, obviously, because we cannot expect the same kind of relationship between Pakistani state and the Afghan Taliban, which we have experienced in the past years. You know, so that is important. Afghan Talibans have been developed diplomatically and politically as well at the same time. So that is one aspect of it. The second important thing is why the Afghan Taliban started their war with the slogan that we will get these occupiers out of Afghanistan. So the negotiation is not about who's going to win over there. It is not about the division of government or division of perks. It is about when are you going to leave Afghanistan. So it is very clear because there is a logic behind it. Afghan Taliban at the moment are in strength. They are at the dominant position. United States of America, its allies, and the Afghan government is not. So why will they come to the table with a losing, you can say, a posture? No, they will be on the table with the winning ones. So that is more important to understand. That's what US is trying to do in the region. It is trying to pressurize Pakistan because they know the fact they cannot defeat Taliban. Even in the recent statements by US officials, it was like, you will not defeat us. It was not about we will defeat you, no. So that is very clear even from their own statements, that they are not here to defeat Taliban. They are here to bring them on the table to have a face-saving exit from Afghanistan. One way of looking at it. But the exit does not necessarily mean full withdrawal from Afghanistan. It is, I don't think so. If I would have been an American statesman, I would have never advised my president to have an exit from Afghanistan. Afghanistan's strategic location and the importance of the region, these are the two most important hurdles in exit strategy from Afghanistan. Afghanistan is right in the middle of the region, which is going to become, which is becoming the power holder of the next, this century and the next century. So this is important that the United States of America stays in Afghanistan, and at the same time, these kind of processes which we see, like negotiation processes, I don't think there is going to be a conclusive result from these processes. It is going to be breakups, and I think over the period of time, Pakistan, US have been very good at breakups, and they have been blaming each other, as a mother-in-law, and they
so what do you think about Sheraz's point of view of the Americans, rather Sheraz's advice to the Americans of never leaving this region? Because, as far as we're concerned, I think the first thing the Americans need to do is pack up their bags and go home.
I think
if I'm an American statesman,
I think it is very good suggestion, because the neck of American is very tightly held up here, and longer the neck is there in the
as we saw in the case of the Russians.
Yeah. So it is not they are busy here, so it's okay. But as long as this region is concerned, or their American interest is concerned, they have fought war here. They have seen for last 16 years. They know it's not winnable war. Now their force commander has said one very important thing also, that they are now moving toward the end game. End game is not only it is the victory. End game it is the final solution, which is acceptable to the Taliban also, and it is acceptable to the Ashraf Ghani also, and to the Americans to some extent also. So that is the basic issue. And now they want to build different pressure, like from Pakistan, and so the Pakistan can use their influence over perhaps Taliban, what they perceive and think. But they have now lost that leverage through many their own courtesies and the efforts, and perhaps Pakistan is not now in a position to help them in a way that Pakistan earlier was. It is now difficult for Pakistan also.
I think the Afghans would slightly disagree with that point of view, because I also want to bring up this very important trip that was taken by Nikki Haley, who I would like to refer to as Nimrata Randhawa. She was in Kabul, and again, coming back after her visit, she wanted the world powers to step up pressure on Pakistan. And she also spoke about the government considering holding peace talks with the Taliban to end the decades of insurgency. While the peace talks will be Afghan-led, and the Kabul government did request the Security Council to weigh in to bring Pakistan into the equation, sir. How beautiful is that? Would you like to comment on that, sir?
No.
On the one hand, they want to ratchet up pressure on Pakistan, but on the other hand, they also realize that they cannot really achieve any kind of solution unless Pakistan is part of that solution.
I tell you, it is follow-up of the same narrative, the same plan, and the same tweet. And they are trying now to unfold that whatever is their narrative and implement there in Afghanistan. Nikki is, she's a second generation Indian, and she has probably a lot of love for her homeland, and she comes here.
Mother country, rather.
Mother country.
Motherland.
What and what not she is doing, and all their community is doing there, right? But one thing is very clear. what all allegations they have raised so far, India is already carrying out a lot of propaganda against Pakistan, and with now their nexus with the USA, they probably thought that these are very conducive environment now, perhaps to create a front for the Pakistan, which can keep the Pakistan in trouble and keep the Pakistan unstable. But I think it is very important to understand for the USA also and for the Indians also that a stable and terror-free Pakistan
Is in their favor.
Is in their favor in
Absolutely.
this region. So, and for us also at the same time, a stable and peaceful Afghanistan is in the favor of Pakistan.
Absolutely, sir. We've
Right?
been saying that from day
Yes.
one.
But for this, there has to be sincerity, resolve, and very, very pragmatic understanding and approach to undertake these issues. But I think the track they are following now, Americans and the Indians, there is no end to this.
Well, it seems, sir, and Mahrrukh, I'd like to have your opinion on this. It seems that Madam Nimrata Randhawa is actually not really helping the United States with her statements. Her entire slant and her entire thrust seems to be in terms of promoting India's interests in the United States and around the world rather than promoting what's good for the US. She does not specify what kind of measures should be taken to pressure Pakistan further, except to say that why don't we just impose sanctions on them, which is just what India wants. So it is basically India's line that she is towing in the United Nations and not that of the US of A.
I think, like Sahih said, that India's propaganda against Pakistan is quite strong in the US at the moment. And Nikki Haley is not just one figure. We can see a lot of Indian, second generation Indians in Trump's administration.
Yeah, and they've
So-
cost him quite a lot, by
Yes,
the way. There
and
was this
that-
lawyer also who damaged him in the, I think, Michael Flynn
Yes,
case.
exactly.
So,
So
there you go.
that is what we see. This is the reflection that we get now with their policy coming towards Pakistan. And secondly, I would also mention here that India's lobby in US is the second strongest next to the Jews lobby, and that is an extremely anti-Pakistan lobby that they're doing there. So this brings nothing new to the table, as India is and forever probably will be something that we need to be wary of. But with US's concern, yes, we have concerns, but I think Pakistan's role should be very balanced in this approach. Pakistan's role at times is either over-exaggerated or underestimated. With the Taliban, Pakistan has quite oftenly told the US that you need to involve regional players into this peace process. Pakistan used to have that say to the Taliban, but over the years, it has lost that confidence, or the confidence that those factions had on Pakistan. So we need to include, we as Pakistan or the international community and US needs to include players like China, Russia or Iran, for the say, who have actual stakes in the region with a peaceful Afghanistan or with a very fragile Afghanistan.
Right. And Shiraz, another thing that was that also came out from this delegation that went to Afghanistan, the Kazakh ambassador said that the parliamentary elections in Afghanistan must take place on time, must be transparent, and they're the only way to ensure the credibility of the government. Now, having an election in Afghanistan under the circumstances, would it be a credible election with more than 60% of the country not under the government's control?
Well, having elections, transparent elections in Afghanistan, I think maybe it will bring about the results, but I think the fruits of democracy in the same sense, I think may take 50 years, plus 50 years, and Afghanistan doesn't have that much of time at the moment. So that is one way of looking at it. I think the most important thing is Afghanistan then again needs to look for itself. Because if you have, as you said, about a transparent election in Afghanistan, it means that there will be some other powers who are coming to the table, to the chairs. It's not going to be the existing government which is sitting over there. So there will be no transparent elections in Afghanistan in the near future. That's how I see it. Secondly, the most important thing, the thing which we were discussing earlier about Pakistan, I mentioned in the previous program with you, like United States of America is neither our enemy nor our friend. So that should be our policy way forward. Talking about the Indian factor, Indian and Israeli factor. Recently, Modi and the Israeli Prime Minister has very clearly said that Islam is our enemy. You know,
Yes.
so that needs to be understood accordingly.
Absolutely.
So, and the second,
There was no mincing of the words.
no
there.
mincing of the words. It is unequivocal. On the other hand, Iran and Pakistan are now talking about, now they are targeting us, then later on they will target somebody else. So we need to make up certain plans, policies in order to counter this kind of initiative by United States and its allies. So it is going to be interesting in the region. This kind of power politics will continue because of the fact that the importance of the region is so much, because the power is shifting from the west towards the east. So China will keep on playing its diplomatic role in this process, but it will not come up front. You know, same goes with Russia. So they are waiting at the moment. They are waiting till U.S. exhausts all its options in Afghanistan, along with India. India is also an option in the region.
Right.
So because Indian foreign policy has been very prudent, so to speak.
When they were the non-aligned movement, you mean?
Then and even now, when
now they're completely
US
aligned.
strategy,
Now we have a troika in the region, which is Israel, America,
now
and
you have to see India in a
India.
different way. They asked about having boots on ground in Afghanistan. India totally, completely denied. They put themselves aside. No, we don't want part of that. We want something which is more in favor of our national interest, not what's your national interest. And then there is another recent book by Wilson Center, a US historian has written, and he very clearly replicated the statements which have been said in your program many times, that the problem with US-Pakistan relationship in Afghanistan is the clash of interest. Pakistani national interest is not in line with US regional interest in Afghanistan. It is very clear. And US cannot make Pakistan let go of its interest. So we have to see how Pakistan has been brought up over the period of last 70 years. And then we have to dialogue, and then we have to move forward. United States of America thinks that always power can make the way. It's not the case anymore. So we have to see the kind of relationship which US itself has developed with Pakistan. And then on behalf of that relationship, they should come on table with all the clear, understanding, the preconditions. Then there will be because they talk about winning, they have the different definition of winning. Pakistan has a different definition of winning. They talk about objective, the definition is altogether different. They talk about even peace. Peace for Pakistan has a different definition. Really? Whereas for United States of America, it is a totally different concept. So I would say there have been mistakes made by both the parties. I'm not in favor of completely antagonizing United States of America. No. There are mistakes which are made by both the parties, Pakistan and United States of America, both of them. They have been lying to each other. Fine, fair enough. We have to look forward. We want common ground. If you talk about common ground, first let's look for those common grounds. The common ground, you come up with the term peace in Afghanistan. That's not a common ground. That's just a statement. The devil lies in the details. So you have to go deep into the issue and then come up with some logical answers, because I don't think it is in Pakistan's national interest to have peace in Afghanistan. Obviously, it shares one of the longest borders with Afghanistan. But that does not mean that the same peace is what US is seeking in Afghanistan.
Well, that's great advice from Sheraz, I would say. Sir, moving on, I also want to broaden the discussion and bring the tensions being created on our eastern border by India. Even today, I think there was an attack on the Sialkot sector. 2 ladies, I think 2 women lost their lives as a result. Civilians, I might add, lost their lives as a result of that attack. And we've seen that the number of attacks on the eastern border have increased exponentially over the last year. And then especially within this first month, there's been over 70 violations of the ceasefire agreement. The month hasn't even ended yet, sir. Then we come on to the statement by Bipin Rawat about calling Pakistan's nuclear bluff. Would you like to elaborate, sir, on these particular aspects?
Just see the time frame of this statement and the background of this statement. It's quite evident since that tweet came from Mr. Trump from there, and they started building pressure on Pakistan. First it was by the USA, and then they were trying from all over the world, as now they have, Nikki has said. So, but in this region, the best option for them was India, to use India, whether their boots, whether on the eastern front or economically or whatever. So, they have selected India just for this purpose. And in the same context, our eastern border was quite hot for last about 2 to 3 weeks in this context, and this statement also came. I tell you this statement, particularly this nuclear bluff, this statement, this term is very much has been used earlier once Pakistan was in a process of developing the nuclear capability. But now once it is the world over, it is known, and the world powers have accepted Pakistan as one of the nuclear member country. So, their IAEA, they know it very well.
But they have a very high opinion of Pakistan's
very high
nuclear
opinion
facilities.
and about our security and
a
safety
very
standards.
low opinion of the Indians, I might add.
Yeah, because no, as long as the bluff is concerned, it cannot be taken in this context that they are probably denying our capability. It is not that way. It is what I think is, they think that if under their Cold Star doctrine, that they think that there is a room for the limited war. Limited war is where you have the limited war theatre, you have the limited objectives and aims of the battle, and this is also just on operational and tactical level, this war. So, they probably think that there is still, they want to cut a role for this type of war, to keep pressure on Pakistan that they still have option of the conventional war. And in that conventional war, they think that we will control the conventional war to the level whereby the threshold comes that Pakistan can respond in a nuclear terms. But I know that it is very difficult. Always these limited wars, they are not controlled, and they expand, because once the war starts, it is not in the hand of India only, it is then in hand of Pakistan also, that where they have to, how they have to respond, and what will be the volume, and what will be the magnitude of the response. It depends on that. And they this bluff, word bluff was used, one, to motivate their troops also, that they
shouldn't worry, they won't be nuked.
They shouldn't worry, and they should pick up a courage to cross the border also. And very this Cold War doctrine is, it is crossing of border, because
they also have just ordered a huge number of guns for their border forces specifically.
I think our statement from the ISPR was very clear, very comprehensive, and that is based on reality also. If we see, it is just not possible. They may would like to initiate a limited war, but Pakistan would not like to respond limited, in limited terms. Pakistan would not like to bluff its own option. They may bluff. So, it is in the strategic term, it is then the prerogative is passed over to Pakistan once they start. But at the same time, I think Pakistan has every time said that we are a very responsible nation in this regard, and this nuclear capability is only built for India. God forbid, whenever it will be used against India and no other country in the world. So, this should be very, very clear, and as long as their army chief statement, I think he is such a senior officer, and I as a soldier, I respect him, and I do not expect such statements from such a senior officer.
Well, if you look at Twitter, sir, there are a number of Indian nationals, Indian residents who have responded to Bipin Rawat's statement, and unfortunately, I would not like to use the words that the Indian diaspora have used for him.
Bipin Rawat,
we'll leave it at that, sir.
I tell
he's not very smart.
He's a son of a general. He was born with the golden spoon, and thereafter he was pampered in the Indian Army, and his all promotions were controversial, and his promotion and appointment to the rank of Chief of Army Staff at the Indian Army it was again controversial because there were many better options there.
I'm sure that the Indians also feel slighted, sir, after his appointment. But we'll leave it at that, sir. Thank you very much for sharing your views with PTV World. Well, you heard the conversation. And in conclusion, as we always say, and we've been saying it for a long time, the only way forward for peace in Afghanistan is a negotiated settlement with the Afghan Taliban and all factions that represent Afghanistan. We hope that Afghanistan moves towards peace with an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process. With that hope, and on that note, it's goodbye.
Youth. Every year around 6,000 Afghan youth are coming and they are being admitted in Pakistani universities, leading universities, in medical colleges, in engineering universities. It's a great initiative. I really support that. That's what neighbors should do. That's what we are. That is the actual face of Pakistan. But this kind of overtures should be advertised as well. And again, coming back to repatriation, with the help of United Nations, with the help of United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, not only the world should recognize our role, our significance, that the role that we have played. Rather, we should be facilitated in this process.
But
and this is a test case for Afghanistan as well.
But unfortunately, we're facing resistance because the government has already given an extension for 1 month. Their visas or their stay expired on the 31st of December. We extended it till the 31st of January. And now the government is not in no mood of extending it further. But officials that are dealing with this from the UNHCR and other agencies are talking about the return of the Afghans of not being an easy task. They say it requires at least 1 more year. They also talk about the tripartite agreement under which the government cannot just kick out the Afghans, and then the elders in the Shura of the Afghans, they have also tried to pressurize the government to not take this step. So how is that going to actually happen? How are we going to make sure that the Afghans do go back to their own country, because there are problems that we are also dealing with?
I think the Afghan government needs to realize the responsibility. It's a great responsibility on their shoulders. They need to talk to Pakistani counterparts. They need to channelize the ways and means to re-establish the Afghan nationals in their society, in their social fabric. It's been a lot of time now, and they have been making tall claims as well. So if they are making tall claims and they have problems with the state of Pakistan as well, the first instance should be that they should create some viable and better space for all these Afghans.
Yes, because according to an Afghan elder, 400,000 refugees went back to Afghanistan last year under the voluntary return program, and 100,000 of those came back. And the reason they came back was because the Afghan government did not provide them with the required facilities.
So, Waqas, I know some of the business families who were doing their businesses in Pakistan. They repatriated, and because they had money as well, they were very well established, and they just came back after 3-4 months because there are no business opportunities, there are no health facilities, there are no basic amenities, and now they are living on their visas. I mean, they are traveling with Afghan passports like foreigners. Otherwise, they were staying very comfortably in Pakistan and nobody used to touch them, bother them. But now they are going through all these official processes, but they want to stay in Pakistan, they want to do business in Pakistan because they say that Afghan government is not cooperating with us. And last week there had been the jirga of elders of Afghans as well in Peshawar, and they've really demanded from Pakistan government that there should be an amicable solution, there should be a middle way.
They want at least 3 to 5 years to continue to stay in Pakistan and then slowly be repatriated to Afghanistan. Do you think that's a workable solution, Shima Saab, in your opinion, considering the way the situation is so fluid between Afghanistan and Pakistan?
I think one thing is fine, that at least the debate has started that we have to send them back. One thing. We just started it looking at the behavior of the Afghans. I think that should be known. earlier the way we were stopped and we were not talking of them, they were either the UNHCR is paying or the way the cost is being paid by us, not by the UNHCR. Some few $100 if they are giving to any individual or a family, that is
$200.
that is not sufficient.
Upon
definite.
return.
Yeah, on return, upon return. The point is that we face that, at least the debate has started. Looking at the poverty, lack of infrastructure and the facilities in Afghanistan, how can they believe that we can stay there? So they know that how we have the facilities in this country and we have survived and equal opportunities for business and moving forward. Although we got damaged by the Afghans in many ways, but somehow had this card Pakistan is playing, in my understanding, that we will send the refugees back. Why? Because the Afghans were not listening, the government was not listening, and I think while we send them back, there is no change in the Afghan mood. I mean, I'm talking about the government's mood. So they don't bother about that if we are sending them back, because they're fine if you're sending them. They never talk to us. There is no meeting, here that look, we don't want them to back. Please have them for a few years. So Pakistan wanted to have some leverage with this, but Pakistan couldn't have leverage, so we actually sent them back. So, so I think we should work on that. But it is good for us to make the Afghans realize that we need to keep on talking to them, look, this is what we have.
Okay, we're almost out of time, so before we close the program, one important thing that's come up is about the amount of arms that India is amassing, especially for their troops on the borders, which is with Pakistan and of course with China as well. They have become the world's largest defense importer in the world. Now, seeing that the number of weapons that they're amassing on the border very quickly, how is that going to help in regional peace?
Just a one-liner. I mean, the military-industrial complex that has developed in India is pressurizing, it's influencing the media, the legislature to rationalize their purchases. That's why you see that there is this upsurge in LOC firings. There are these rash statements from responsible people in the Indian military and the Indian cabinet, because actually everybody is justifying those $55 billion and purchases like this.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. Well, you heard the conversation, and I would urge you to draw your own conclusions, but we hope that peace returns to this region and indeed to the entire world, and we hope that doublespeak is not employed when we talk about peace. On that note, it's goodbye.